If you're watching this right now and you've been training for years, eating all of the right things, eating clean and doing all of the right things, and yet still your body basically looks the same, you're still stuck with this ring of stubborn belly fat around the midsection that won't go no matter what you do, then this video is for you, because I'm going to take you through the story of Eugene, who's a client of mine, business owner, 59 years old, who managed to achieve this incredible transformation in less than 6 months by following our 3-step framework. Now, I want to take you through today exactly what he did so you can look to do the same thing for yourself and hopefully achieve a similar result. But before we get into that, let me just explain a little bit about Eugene himself. Like, Eugene came to us as a very active person. You know, he was active with his work, constantly on his feet, constantly moving. He also swam 4 to 5 times per week. He was also training consistently, and he was making good, conscious decisions around his food whilst looking after, in his eyes, his health in the best possible way, from sleep, stress management, and all this. So he really did think he was doing everything right. Eugene's initial motivation to change and implement all of these habits came off the back of a cancer diagnosis. As you can see on these pictures here, he has the colostomy bag, which came off the back of a bowel cancer diagnosis. And ultimately, after this, which happened years ago, he started to take proper care of himself and started to eat better, started to look after himself with regards to movement, and just started to put more things in place. However, even though he was doing all of these different things and putting a lot of time and energy into his health, his body didn't really see the changes. And this is because he didn't really know what his body needed specifically. And that's where we came in with step 1 of this framework. Because the first step, as it is with all of the clients that we work with, was to get the right data. He had spent years doing what he thought was right, and may well have been right for a lot of other people, but wasn't specific to what he needed. So the very first thing that we did was run a 7 to 10 day diagnostics mapping to outline and gain insight into exactly what his body needed at a physiological level. Now, we did this through various tests, from comprehensive blood tests, we did this through a full symptoms assessment, we did this through a historical lifestyle assessment, so we understood kind of what had led him up to that point too. And we also did this through a genetic test to understand if he had any predispositions to certain things. Once we'd run this diagnostics, it became very, very clear what needed to be addressed. He had issues around his cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol and low HDL cholesterol. He had low immune cells, so his white blood cells were very, very low. He had high inflammation. He had various nutrient deficiencies, and his testosterone levels were suboptimal too. So what this showed us was that despite all the training that he was putting in, he was actually training too much, and he was being too exertive with the types of training he was doing, which was burning his body out even further, causing more inflammation, higher cortisol, lower testosterone, and this is why he was stuck with this stubborn fat, and his body just simply didn't change, and he couldn't develop any real tissue. And ironically, as we see with so many other guys, Eugene had had a lot of tests before, based on the fact that he'd had cancer and he'd had a lot of blood tests, but none of this had shown up on any of those tests. And that's because they're using the normal ranges to gauge, you know, the function of these different systems rather than what is actually optimal for health. So every blood test had basically come back normal, and so he was left feeling like this is just how things were going to be. The way that we ran the tests was to look at things from the optimal health range, and that uncovered a lot of issues that had previously been missed. And that gave us clarity around everything we needed to put in place. What supplements he needed, what nutrition he needed, what nutrients he needed to focus on, how much training would be in alignment with his body's ability to recover, which is really, really important, because if you do too much, you don't make progress. If you do too little, you also don't make progress. So what this allowed us to do is really put together a protocol that was biologically suited to what he needed. And that was absolutely fundamental in this entire process, taking him from this to this. The second stage of this process for Eugene was the implementation of his protocol. Now we had the data, we had to provide him with something that wasn't only suitable for him biologically, but also fit within his lifestyle. You know, Eugene's a business owner, he has a family, he has a lot of demands, he has a lot of responsibility, and finding something that was going to work within all of that was in many ways the most important thing, because I have a belief that, you know, what is optimal biologically might not be what's optimal for you as an individual if it doesn't suit what your lifestyle actually allows you to be doing consistently. So what we have to do, the actual most optimal approach, is something that is as close to biologically optimal, but also is you can actually adhere to that thing because it fits within your lifestyle, and that's what we had to work with. So the protocol we put in place for Eugene was around 80 to 85% optimal biologically, but that essentially was the most optimal approach for him because it allowed him to actually consistently do the work required to get the result that you can see. Now, what this consisted of was actually getting him to train less and change the type of training he was doing. He was doing a lot of high intensity cardio work and endurance cardio in the form of swimming, in the form of cycling, in the form of kind of like endurance sports. He was very, very passionate about endurance sports like that. Now, what was key is we didn't want to take that out of his life, but we had to find a way to moderate that while we allowed his body to recover properly, because we could see that certain systems were failing to recover. Things like testosterone, things like cortisol, things like his white blood cells being low were indications that there was too much output versus the input. So what we needed to do is dial back on basically everything he was exerting and focus heavily on recovery. So we really looked into his sleep architecture, tracking his sleep through fitness trackers, making sure he's aiming for around 20% deep sleep so that he can recover properly. We also focused on recovering cortisol in the evening time. This involved a bedtime wind down routine with certain supplements like magnesium, L-theanine, lemon balm, and some ashwagandha as well to support cortisol as he led towards bedtime. And this would help him sleep a lot better and get more optimal sleep, more deep sleep, where he would recover better. This was so important in order to make sure every day he was recharging from the effort that he was putting in. We also had to really dial in his nutrition. He actually needed more carbohydrates than he was consuming. He was being quite conservative about his carbohydrate consumption because he'd heard a lot of stuff online about, eating too much carbs. But because he was so active at work and also active with the sports he was doing, he needed a lot more. He had the misconception that he actually needed more protein, and he needed enough protein, that's for sure. But he actually needed more carbohydrates to fuel his training. So what we did is we restructured his entire nutrition plan. This looked like sufficient protein to recover, a high amount of carbohydrates to fuel training and making sure he's getting enough pre and post workout to make sure he's getting the most out of his sessions, and a high amount of fat too, to ensure that he has the support for hormones, which was very important when we looked at some of the issues around his sex hormones. We also implemented a list of supplements to help support his systems back into optimal health. This included things like vitamin D with K2, this involved zinc, this involved magnesium, it involved cod liver oil, as well as certain other things to help support his systems back into optimal health and fix certain deficiencies that came out on his blood tests. With this protocol in place, and this is just a surface level overview of what he actually did, the results came like within a matter of weeks. He started to feel better, which is the key, because when your energy is good, you start to perform better. He started to feel more motivated, and then the results came and he had this momentum that just kind of flowed from one week into the next, where he was firing on all cylinders, seeing the changes, feeling the changes, and fully bought in after that, and the rest was really history. And this brings us to the third step. Now, Eugene himself will probably tell you that he needed a lot of reassurance through this process. He needed to know constantly that he was doing the right things, that he wasn't falling off track. And so that's where step 3, coach accountability, came in handy every step of the way, because Eugene then had a coach that he was 100% accountable to every single day and every single week, where he could ask questions, get the reassurance he needed to know that he was doing the right things, and also be reviewed on what he was doing and assessed on whether the protocol that he was following was the most efficient protocol for him at that particular time. Because one thing a lot of people miss is that what works for you on day 1 might not be what works for you on week 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Things need to constantly be assessed, adjusted to suit your body as it is there. That might be a change in calories, it might be a change in supplementation, it might be a change in training volume, in how much you need to focus on recovery and sleep and things like this. And Eugene really valued that, because he was someone who really focused on being his best self, but he needed to know that what he was doing was the right thing to feel confident in the daily actions. And so when we reviewed him every week, he got a full video, a review video sent over, which would give him the exact action steps to take across everything from nutrition, training, lifestyle, and everything in between. He really valued this because it gave him absolute clarity. Then he also had the coach on hand to ask any questions to have one-to-one calls with. And from the various conversations that I had with Eugene over the weeks and months, I could see that he was very much a perfectionist. He wanted to know that he was doing everything to the letter, and the result speaks for itself, because that kind of mentality is what leads to a result like you can see with Eugene. Like, this is not a guy who has all the time in the world. This is not a guy who has no responsibility. He's a business owner. He's just about to head into his 60s. He's he's got family, he's got a wife, he's got demands, and yet he's still being able to get it done because we've implemented a process that works for him biologically and from a lifestyle perspective. And fast forward to today, this is what he looks like. But more importantly, he feels younger, he feels fitter than ever, he feels more in control of his health, and he feels confident that he has the longevity and he has the health span that's going to last him for the next 2, maybe 3 decades. And to top it all off, as if all of this isn't incredible enough with these physical changes and how he feels, he managed to cross-country ski over 100 kilometers through Switzerland in the name of cancer research. Something he never thought he'd be able to do 12 months ago before he came on the program. This is a man who, maybe just like you, was doing all of the right things in his eyes, was training, was eating reasonably well, was taking care of himself, and yet still wasn't seeing the changes that he thought he deserved. And inside just 6 months, this is what he's been able to achieve by having a biologically suited protocol, by having something that fits within his lifestyle, and by having the support and accountability to make sure he sees it through for the long haul. So if you are watching this right now and Eugene's story sounds familiar, you feel like you're doing all the right things, you're putting the effort in, you're grinding, and you're restricting yourself through food, but you're still not seeing the changes, then click the link that goes with this video. You'll find a video on that link which outlines the entire process, and it will take you through the blood optimization system, the same system that we used with Eugene and all of these guys who we've worked with previously. If you decide to book a health optimization audit call with our team, what we will then be able to do is outline what is holding you back on a biological level, what symptoms are getting in the way of you getting the results that you deserve, and what is the exact game plan that you will need to achieve a result like this. Click the link, book your slot, and we'll see you on the call.